As a rooted deeply and forward-looking community, we hope that you will be blessed by this message. For more information, visit rechurchza.com.
So we've been busy with leadership, and this morning I want to speak about developing leadership, because a lot of it happens in secret. A lot of it happens in the obscure moments, in the strange jobs, in the irritating bosses, in the parents that drive us nuts, even when they're 80. Oh, okay, my mom's not 80. I'll keep on saying to her, you're borderline 80. And she says, don't be ridiculous. I'm not borderline anything. But she is. It's not but it happens. It happens eventually if you live long enough. Then you become borderline 80, which is a good thing. I think. Do not speak from experience. So I'm going to talk to you about Joshua, but I'm not going to talk about Joshua after he does but after God comes to him and says, be bold and courageous. Who's that? I see you all staring at something. I'm wondering what it was. Maybe it was an angel. Well, but Joshua went through a whole development, and it starts in Exodus 17. So you can turn there if you want to verse 9, where it's just after Moses has had the encounter with the rock, and he's beaten the rock, and the people have, God's actually not particularly impressed with them, because it's like saying, are you going to tempt me or not? But it comes out of that. And after that, they meet up for the first times with the Amalekites. And the Amalekites is fascinating because they do it multiple times. So now Amalekite came in verse 8, chapter 17, Exodus 17. And for the first time after that, when Amalekite came and fought with Israel in Rephidim, and Moses came to Joshua, and that's the first time we really hear of him. And he says to Joshua, you go and choose us some men and go out and fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on top of the hill with the rod of God in my hand. And so Joshua did as Moses said to him, and he fought with Amalek. And Moses and Aaron and Hur went up on the hill. And we know the story where Moses' arms get tired, and as Aaron and Hur hold it up, Joshua wins. But the interesting thing is that the victory is almost like accounted to Joshua. If you look in verse 13, it says, Joshua defeated Amalek and his people with the edge of his sword. And then the Lord said to Moses, write this for a memorial in the book and recount it in the hearing of Joshua. So he's like, okay, so you write it in the book and then you read it to the boy. Because Joshua was a young man. He wasn't old at this stage at all. And recount it in the hearing of Joshua that I will utterly blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under the heaven. And Moses then built an altar and called its name, the Lord is my banner. For he said, because the Lord has sworn, the Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation. And Amalek actually becomes quite a developmental tool in the life of Joshua, just as he experiences stuff. And it starts there. But the reality is that when we meet Joshua, he's a young man. He's under orders. He's got a boss of sorts. His name is Moses. He's a strange man, the meekest man in the earth. He's got a shiny face, so much so he has to wear a veil. And he does fascinating things. I mean, he meets with God, goes up the mountain, sees God, does all these things. But Joshua's exposed to this person. And sometimes the people that we're exposed to in our developmental, and the reality is, I want to start from a different angle too. Every single body leads something, even if it's just yourself. Moms lead kids, dads lead families, we have workers, we have projects, we lead concept, we lead the introduction of technology into the earth, we lead businesses that cause things to happen, but every single person's got some of this built into there. So often when we talk about leadership, the thought goes to a place of saying it's church leadership. Well, it's definitely that too. But the reality is we've got about 2 hours here and 166 odd hours, I think, to practice this stuff in your own real world. And that's what equipping is all about. So when you're listening to this, please don't listen to it to hear functions of church leadership. That's not the goal. This is personal development 101. Of going to God, okay, so what have you put inside of me? What am I responsible for leading myself even into as a functional human being in functional space, creating more of heaven on earth? Because that's what we're here for, isn't it? Oh dear, only 4 of us. Okay, so let's start at a different place. For God so loved the world that he sent his son so that we would become like him, so that we would fulfill Adam and Eve's mandate of heaven on earth. So that we would bring about a space where God is comfortable to just come and dwell. Not the great escape. Great escape's a fallacy. Absolute fallacy. Will we be in heaven one day? Yes. With highly functional jobs, I've got this gut feel that this practice round's not just. And what we can learn here on our playground is definitely going to stand us for good stead one day. So you might as well do as much as you can here. Silence. Shop. Okay. So bottom line, so Joshua learns things with Amalek. He learns God is for us, not just for him, not just for himself, but for us. It specifically says that there. He learned to overcome. If we turn to Exodus 24, we'll find the next time that Joshua is actually mentioned. And this is when Moses is saying to the 70 elders of Israel, God has invited us up this mountain, literally, to come and meet with him. And it's a very fascinating story because he instructs all of the people that are staying down at the bottom. And then early that morning, they rose up and in verse, where are we? I can see with and without my glasses. It's really irritating. So I'll do that. In verse 4, Moses wrote all the words of the Lord. And then he rose early in the morning and he built an altar at the foot of the mountain and 12 pillars according to the tribes of Israel. And he sent young men of the children of Israel who offered burnt offerings and sacrificed peace offerings of oxen to the Lord. And then he took half the blood and he took in verse 7, he took the book of the covenant and he read it in the hearing of the people, which is fascinating because then does your imagination go to a place of going, so how does their sound system work? Only like 3 million people, he reads it in the presence of the people and you're going, who didn't hear? Or how did they? Is it just my mind that goes there? It would appear. It's just my mind that goes. They say to God, so what is the technology to speak to 3 million people and read them stuff out of a book? And they all said, all that the Lord has said we will do and be obedient. And Moses took the blood, sprinkled it on the people and said, this is the blood of the covenant which the Lord has made for you according to all of these words. And then Moses went up, also with Aaron, Nahab, and Abihu, and 70 of the elders, and they saw the God of Israel. They saw him. That's what it says. And there was under his feet, as if it were paved works of sapphire stone, and it was like the very heavens in its clarity. But on the nobles of the children of Israel, he did not lay his hands. So they saw God, and they ate and they drank. So they went to God, had a meal with him, and he was there. Like, see for serious. But no one sees God. Well, debated. Let's debate. Then the Lord came to Moses. He says, come up to me on the mountain and be there, and I'll give you the stones of tablets and the law and the commandments, which I have written, that you may teach them. So Moses arose with his assistant Joshua, and Moses went up the mountain of God. And so we find this young man again, that it's not me, it's us. It's Moses and Joshua, actually. They go up into the presence of God and they experience all of these things. Like the cloud covers the mountain and the glory of the Lord in verse 16 rested on Mount Sinai, and the cloud covered it for 6 days. And the seventh day he called Moses out of the midst of the cloud. And the sight of the glory of the Lord was like a consuming fire on the top of the mountain in the eyes of the children of Israel. And he went up and he stayed there for 40 days and nights. So the reality is that Joshua got to experience very specific things and experience things by association. And sometimes we have people that when we spend time with them and we start doing stuff with them, we get to experience things that are definitely not our own doing. They're by association. So you've got to choose association carefully. Really carefully. Because if he wasn't Moses's appy, because that's what he was. He was Moses' appy. He wouldn't get access to those things. He didn't have the free pass to do it all by himself. But because of association, there was impartation, there was experience, there was a different exposure. There was all kinds of stuff that happened that he could not do for himself. So, my prayer, Father, is that you'll open up associations for us. Very strategic, specific things that don't look like us, that don't speak like us, that don't do stuff like us. But because we spend time with them, something rubs off. We'll catch something, not just be taught stuff, but something will happen inside of our being that's because of what's in the Moses in our lives, it'll rub off onto us and we'll find ourselves being different people, very different people, just by association. Okay. We're supposed to pray in between, aren't we? So go to Exodus 33, if you'd please. Next time we find Joshua. And by this time, the Israelites have done everything possible to irritate the daylights out of God. Serious, they built a golden calf. They've done all kinds of interesting things. They've wasted their resources. Moses come down and made them drink golden water. All kinds of stuff. But they've irritated God to the point of where he's actually saying to Moses, excuse me, I'll make you a great nation. I'm going to wipe these guys out. I've had enough. And he's going, you can't do that. Imagine what everyone will say about you. You bring these people into the desert, you promise them a promised land, and then you wipe them out. That's not you. And he rebukes God. I mean, that's the intimacy that Moses has with God. He's to be able to say, not a good idea. And he changes his mind. But what it does mean is that Moses then shifts out of the camp and he takes his tent and he goes and pitches it outside. And he turns it into what's called the tabernacle of meeting. And he would literally go in. And what's fascinating is when he'd walk out in the morning, so I think he had a blame at your vrou tent, and then he had to go and visit God tent. Because it seems like he walked through the camp. And it says that every man stood in the face or at the entrance of his tent. There are two ways of measuring that. It can be literally they stood at the physical tent, or they saw where he was going to meet with God spiritually, and they stepped out and stood there with their spirit going, I want. And sometimes that's what you've got to do. You've got to step out of your comfort zone. You've got to say to God, I am not just bound by this body. You've given us a gateway called Jesus, and you've set up a tent of tabernacle in your presence that we can step into and we can actually meet with you and be transformed. And that's actually the goal of this. But the bottom line is this. So it says this. So it was, whenever Moses went out of the tabernacle, that all of the people rose, and each man stood at his tent's door, and he watched Moses until he had gone into the tabernacle. That's verse 8. And it came to pass that when Moses entered the tabernacle, that a pillar of cloud descended and stood at the door of the tabernacle, and the Lord talked with Moses. And all the people saw the pillar of cloud standing at the tabernacle. And all the people rose and worshipped, each man in his tent door. So the Lord spoke to Moses face to face, as a man speaks to his friend. And he would return to the camp, but his servant Joshua, the son of Nun, a young man, did not depart from the tabernacle. So if I read this correctly, what Joshua learned to do is he got by association, Moses set up the functional space. Joshua didn't go and set up his own functional space. He accompanied Moses to there. But his hunger for God and his desire to interact with the Spirit of God in that space made him stay. And sometimes we've just got to stay. When God pitches, you just hang around a bit longer. Don't let Google 1-minute irritation devices tempt you. Not my issue at all. Let's not even pretend. Okay, I'm lying. But the bottom line is this: here's a young man, he didn't depart from that. And the reality out of that, he's changed relationship. It wasn't just with Moses, it was with the God of Moses. It wasn't just with Moses' understanding of leadership, it was actually with the spirit of wisdom that imparted to him. And I'll read to you why I say that a bit later. But he found a secret place. He found a tutorship from the sevenfold Spirit of God going, okay, let me teach you how it works when there's a governance thing. Because here's God who's chosen a man called Abraham and said, out of you I will raise up a nation which will look completely, completely different. And out of Moses, he starts giving them a constitution. Because when you really read the law, there are a couple of relational things. So the 10 Commandments is how not to lose your wife. God's saying, okay, these are the things that really irritate me. Or hang on, let's rephrase that. These are the things that I expect you to keep because we are in a marriage relationship, because that's what he offered to Israel. And they said, no, thanks, Moses can have it. That's what happened at Sinai. They rejected him. But out of that flowed, if you really read the law, it was never about relationship. It was about how to put together a nation that when you follow God's ways, brilliance happens. Heaven happens on earth. And it happened with Solomon. 3 generations of kings in. Here the Queen of Sheba comes along and says, oh dear, it's real. And she trades. And he had 660 tons of gold given to him a year. What on earth for? You can do the maths of what that's worth today. That's what people across the earth came and traded into the blueprints of God that he was manifesting in his functional governance of a nation. They're going, we have to have it. Take our gold. It's okay. You can have it. We'll dig more. But that's what happened a couple of generations later. And that is what they were busy downloading in the space. So that tutorship happened out of beholding. Because what your eye hooks into and what you set your mind upon and what you look upon consistently, you become. That's the principle of God. Did I dig that up myself? Of course not. I've heard it from multiple teachers. But the truth of the matter is that is why we've got to guard our eyes and why we've got to guard what we're fascinated by. Because what you spend most of your time on, you start looking like. So I should look like a garden, but I don't. I don't. Okay, so bottom line is that's what it is. But here you find a man called Joshua who hangs around a guy whose face shines, who sets up tents where God pitches, his whole presence arrives, that the whole nation worships because it's so intense and real. And he's going, okay, teach me. I want to get it. Show me. I have to have wisdom. If you're going to give me this nation to rule and you're going to take me across the river and you're going to make me the person that's responsible for beating up all of these other nations, but more than that, for implementing the space where people live, for bringing about the patterns that we need to follow, for bringing about the functional governance and the functional space in that space. If I don't have wisdom, I'm going to disappoint you immensely. In fact, I might do it on purpose. And that's the space that we've got to become serious with God, of going, so what am I here for? I'm not here just to have kids and make money and go on holiday and stuff. You're not just here to come to church. This is the space where we get all kinds of stuff. But you've got to work out your salvation. You've got to figure out what you're here for. You've got to take responsibility for the places that you need to lead. Business, children, life, politics, who knows? It's unique. That's between you and God. But we've got to find this place. And it's found in the secret place, because when you come into the secret place, the one thing that happens, you start remembering who you are. So why do we come to remembrance? So that you can remember who you are. Does stuff happen when we do things corporately? Of course it does, and. But the key is, who am I? Who was I when I was in the heart of God, being birthed into this physical body, that we came into all kinds of agreements about of stuff that I would do for you? Joshua had a whole plan written. God had a whole lot of stuff written out for him. And it's time to get to the place of where we really, really take responsibility for that stuff. Don't wait for heaven to come, or don't wait to go to heaven. Don't wait to die. Don't we die every day in Christ? Come, it says we die daily, so you're dead. Get over it. Now, in that space of death, what's birthed? What happens with your seed that falls into the ground? What's it meant to bring forth? What we meant to nurture? What we meant to, who are you? And what happens to people and things around you? What happens? How does creation in its frustrated form respond when you're in this space? Take it for a drive. Come on, test it. Go and expect things to respond around you. Expect to walk into rooms and the atmosphere changes, because we carry the governance of God in our hearts, in our being. And if as long as we sit here, when we learn to sit on the seat of our throne, we can, in that space. Jesus says this. He says, so if you walk into a house and you accept it, leave your peace. How many have left your peace somewhere this week? No one. Okay, take it for a drive. Test it. You walk into people's homes and you leave stuff there. You are entitled to leave your peace at people's homes and businesses and shopping centers and towns and wherever. Your choice. He's not going to do it for you. It's a cognitive, on purpose, I'm going to do this choice. But when you start doing it and you come back and you go, feels better here. Because of you. It's your peace. He's given it to you. You decide what you're going to do with it. Are you going to hog it for yourself? Or are you going to give it away? Your choice. Can you take it back? Of course you can. That's what it says. He says, if they don't listen, well, then take the mud off your feet or the dust off your shoes or whatever you need to do. But the truth is, I think we should leave more peace than what you shake dust. A lot more. Because that's how the world starts changing. It's these deposits. And the reality about those deposits is they're dynamic. You don't have to be there for them to work. You just got to choose to leave them. Choose. So who's not going to try this week? Oh. Gotcha, suckers. In the nicest possible way, of course. So then we go on to the more familiar places of Joshua. So if you, in Numbers, we read about the spies. And the reality about, you all know the story, so I'm not going to go into depth. But the key in this thing is that in the midst of all of these things, he had a different lens. The intimacy with God and the relationship that he had with God caused him to be able to see differently. And he saw God more than he saw giants. And it caused him to have a good report. And having a good report is a very, very important thing. We live in a world where people look for sensationalism and negativity. I mean, even let's talk rugby. Have to talk a little bit of rugby. But this week, there was a mistranslation in the French press or in the English press of where one of the French rugby players said they took the Rugby World Cup away from us. And the press translated it to it, they stole the cup. Different world. Whose report do you believe? Well, being a South African, I don't care what they say, actually. If you want the total truth, we won again. But that's not the point. The point is how we interpret things. And we can interpret things any way we choose. So I can look at a situation, I can see as much negativity as I choose. So you listen to South African economists. And this last week, there was a guy that gave an unbelievably positive outlook on South Africa and how little really needs to change. All that needs to change is the billion rand that we currently spend on financing corruption a day. If that changes, well, then we shop. The 8 trillion rand that we do turnover is not bad at all. The other guys go, ons is in ons ding is in. It's never been worse. It's going to get terrible. It's absolutely, and I'm going, so who are you going to believe? I really like option A because that's the feeling that I get. I don't get the feeling that they say in the news all the time if you ride around and you do business and stuff. It's still an incredibly robust economy. We should have been bankrupt 20 years ago. We're not. In fact, we're nowhere near. In fact, I think we're about to take off. In spite of what we see on TV, in spite of what the current narrative is, in spite of the stuff that they want us to see because they just shove it in your face all day. It's like going, okay, brilliant. So the British Indians are out of our industry in metal for the first time in 30 years. Thank God. God bless the metals as they leave. They should stay in England. They should keep the money for themselves. We're going to start again. There are all kinds of positive things that when we start seeing that we are going to have an economy that goes from digging in the hole and to exporting the product. And we're sitting with a generation that's going to do like Joshua did, of going to him, give me the witty ideas, give me the inventions, give me the technology, let me take it, show me how to rule, show me how to govern, show me how to access markets. The world's economy is shifting and Africa's the place to be. That's just the truth. We are going into a period of time where I think that so every 500 odd years, the empire or the seat of governance in the earth shifts. Why is Europe in the state it is? Because about 500 years ago, a bit more than that, it shifted from there to America. But America's has shifted and it's come to Africa. And we sit with the outfall of going, oh dear, they've turned up the voltage in the electricity and it's burning our technology because we don't know how to work with this. But as soon as we start adjusting to go, hang on, the frequency has changed. And therefore, I need to adjust to that so that I'm able to function in this space. Then I can guarantee you, your world is about to change. Because if you adjust to the frequency that is changed, then you don't burn when you put your because you're not expecting it to be, I mean, America's 110 volts. It's quite pathetic, but no, that's a bit horrible. Okay, it's wonderful in America. It works for them. But we've got 240 odd. So you put their appliances into our walls, what happens? They burn out. And that's what we're doing. We're trying to import all the stuff from everywhere in the universe and saying, when we plug it into our system, it doesn't work. It's not wired for us. It's wired for them. So we need to make an adjustment and start saying to God, okay, how does our stuff work for export? Solomon did what? He put together all of these brilliant things, brought about an establishment of, I want to say, the kingdom of God. To a great degree, that's what it was. It was do things my way, you get my results. So we need to go back to this thing. And one of the things I wrote specifically about Joshua is that when they crossed the river, when God said to him, okay, you're the boss now, but the boss was actually, listen to me, he moved into a different dispensation and was a dispensation of favor. But he had to take the book of the law and he had to practice the patterns. And so when we go back to these crib notes, it's not to find out what's right and wrong. It's to go to God, what are you busy with? How do I fit in? How does this stuff work? Because if anybody desires to make things right in this earth, it's not us, it's him. We can just participate with his patterns and we can really link into that thing. I'm about to become long-winded, but I'm not going to. So it's got to do with having a different lens, choosing to have a different report, choosing not to live in your current state of time. Because time is flexy. As soon as you step into God, he's outside of time and he lives inside of you. So you can explore the future. You can bring back stuff. You can say, okay, how does it work there? And bring it back. And suddenly you're ahead of your time. And being ahead of your time has consequences, and it's challenging because a lot of stuff doesn't totally work the way that for everybody else. It works differently for you. And you'll question whether you're being a total idiot or totally brilliant, because there's a very fine line in my experience. Geez, it's fine. And when you go to people that you want to bounce it off, they'll look at you and go, Salviera, hey, God help us. But then you get better outcomes, and you're going, it's me again. Or it's him again. Or it's us again. Maybe it's us. I like the us version. So go to, for 1 second or 3, to Deuteronomy 34, which is the last book, or the last chapter of that book. So it's sort of like the handover chapter. The previous chapter, Moses is like blessing everybody. But what I want to say to you, that what I said to you, that when he spent time in the tent alone, he received instruction. So it says in verse 9, now Joshua the son of man was full of the spirit of wisdom. I'll read that again. Joshua the son of Nun was full of the spirit of wisdom. Why? Because Moses had laid his hands on him. So the children of Israel heeded him and did as the Lord had commanded Moses. And that's association again, as you come back to the place of where you step into a different place of favor, you step into a different place of wisdom, you step into a different place of obedience, you step into all kinds of stuff. And from there, I mean, it just explodes. He manages, or he doesn't manage anything. God says to him, okay, you're going to cross the river, you're going to put your staff down, this is going to happen. And he does it. And the river backs up to a place called Adam, which is very interesting in itself. Why a place called Adam? So he literally took the whole of history of mankind and said, I'm going back to the beginning. I'm just going to open it up for you. Go across. We've got to change history. Then he sorts out Jericho with 3 million Jews that are quiet for a week, which is a miracle. Come on, think about it. How do you keep that number of men quiet for a week walking around a city? Come on, I bet you we wouldn't keep quiet from here to the gate. How much do you want to bet? Maybe that's why I didn't choose South Africans. But see, it's virtually impossible. But in any case, he does it. And then he comes up at a very interesting, his second battle is a place called Ai. We have Ai, don't we? Not necessarily negative, not necessarily positive. Depends whose heart it's in and what they're doing with it. But you still got to fight the fight. And just before he does that, he meets up with the commander of the army of the Lord. And he says, so whose side are you on? And he says, neither, quite frankly. Whose side are you on? And we come that day, the day will happen in your life where God doesn't say, God will say to you, I'm not on your side. Are you on mine? Different world. Totally, totally different world. When God asks the question of, so who are you choosing? But let me wrap it up. When they stepped into there, it was very fascinating. In Joshua chapter 5, it refers to this. And this is, I think, where we're standing. In the midst of all of these things, this also counts. In verse 10 odd, maybe exactly in 10. So it's fascinating. It's straight after Gilgal. It's after they'd, these guys somewhere between 0 and 59, because the 20-year-olds died, everybody above 20 died. And God says, okay, circumcise them. So it's not like little boys, it's like the whole lot. Sorry, boys, but after he did that, no, you've got to read the book. It's true, it's what happened. It's not particularly comfortable, but it had effects. So the day will come too where God says to you, hey, I'm after that thing, I'm going to cut it off. You're going to lose some body parts now, boy. And girl too, I think. Of where I'm after that stuff in your heart, which will cause you not to fulfill your destiny. I'm going to circumcise you. I'm going to chop you up. Sorry. It wasn't Moses' idea. It wasn't Joshua's idea. It was God's idea. So get over it. It's no more. But then the Lord said to Joshua, he said, this day I have rolled away the reproach of Egypt from you. And many of us still sit with the reproach of Egypt because it's got a lot to do with the systems we were involved in, the way we made money, the way we were educated, the things we were exposed to, the way we take decisions and draw near to God in certain ways. Where he comes and says, sorry, gone. But I'm rolling. Why am I do that? Because I'm taking the fingerprints of the world and its systems off of your life. That's what Egypt was to them. Therefore, the name of the place is called Gilgal to the day. And the children of Israel camped in Gilgal, and they kept the Passover on the 14th day of the month at twilight on the plains of Jericho. And they ate the produce of the land on the day after Passover, and the unleavened bread and parched grain on the very same day. Interesting, the next verse. Then the manna ceased on the day that they'd eaten the produce of the land. And the children of Israel no longer had manna, and they ate the food of the land of Canaan that year. And the reality is, the places that we need to change our economy in God. We're very used to having Mr. D arrive with whatever we've prayed for. But there's a place of where God's stepping us into a space of where there's abundance. There's more than enough. There are things you didn't work for, that you didn't pray for, that you didn't look for, that you didn't put together, that He's going to give us stuff, because that's what He did to this nation. But He said, if you hold on to the desire to eat of the old system, you will die. Jy gaan vrek van honger, because it doesn't exist for you anymore. It doesn't matter who else it exists for. Once you've stepped into that space, and we've stepped into that space, the economy changes. And in an economy, the rules change, the way it flows, the way it's developed. So they had to learn about the patterns of rain, the patterns of planting, the patterns of harvest. They actually had to do stuff. It wasn't just delivered anymore. There was stuff they had to physically do. And the maturity of the sons of God in the space and elsewhere is that we've got to come into places that we govern, that we create functional space, and we do stuff. It's not just about knowing stuff. It's about doing stuff. You've got to take your faith for a test drive. You've got to actually take hope. And hope is a fascinating thing because it morphs all the time. As soon as it comes true, it's not hope. If you hope for a telephone and I give it to you, you can't hope for a telephone. You've got one. Now what you can do with it? And then you've got to hope for something else, because hope is the landing patch of where faith materializes. And if you don't have hope, you don't have faith. And if you don't have faith, stuff doesn't materialize, because faith is substance. It's out the treasury of Yahweh. It's got to come into the earth, and we are the ones that allow it to. So the treasury of God is filled with creative matter. It doesn't have form. It takes form according to the things you hope for. So if you don't go back and hope for certain things, that creative matter just doesn't become what it should. And it's limitless, because God's limitless. But I'm slightly off track now, maybe not. So the things that we need to do. We need to learn to overcome. We need to believe that God is for us. We get certain experiences and gifts and things like that only by association. You don't have to open all the doors for yourself. If one wins, we all win. It's like rugby. Until the team wins, no one wins. Even if you get the man of the match, you're the most brilliant player in the universe, so what? You lost. So we win. If one wins, we win. Okay, so what you're doing is very important. Otherwise, someone else has got to do it, and some of us are lazy. Okay, maybe not lazy, just preoccupied with many other things. But the truth is, we all need to grow into that space. Until all come into the space is what the equipping's for. Okay, so experience by association. Growth happens by relationship, by beholding, by getting tutored by multi. You can go and read Galatians, it's full of that. It's by accessing the secret place on purpose. We've got to learn to look differently so that we see a good report instead of a negative report. And because that in there lies our reward. We need to access the spirit of wisdom by laying on of hands, but by personal experience of saying it's a her. So you can say to her, go and read the first 9 chapters of Proverbs. It's like going, ask me. I'm standing on the corners. I'm waiting for anybody that's doff enough to turn to. And it says that. I'm waiting for the foolish and the stupid and the blind and da. Just please turn this way. So everybody qualifies. She wants to instruct us and bring us to maturity. Okay, that'll release a different dispensation. It releases favor. And it releases a place of where we learn to obey instead of having the need to initiate everything. Initiative is a very good thing, but obedience is a slightly different ballgame. And the reality is God's quite capable of initiating more than enough to keep you busy. I can promise you that. But Joshua had to learn that space of when they crossed it, he did not initiate. He obeyed until it comes to the end of his life. And it says all kinds of good things about him that I'm not going to go to. It's going to take too long. Okay. Allow God to circumcise us. Put up memorial spaces. They did one at the river. They did multiple memorial spaces so that, actually, let's go to Joshua 24. Let's finish this. So at the end of his life, They write this about, I'm not going to read all of it to you. He blessed them, da 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 da. So this is fascinating, but at the end, they talk about everything that happened. And in verse 19, Joshua says to the people, you cannot serve the Lord. It's like, okay. For he is holy, he is a holy God. He is a jealous God. He will not forgive your transgressions nor your sins. If you forsake the Lord and serve foreign gods, he will turn and do you harm and consume you after he has done you good. And the people say to him, no, we will serve the Lord. So he's going, okay. So Joshua says to the people, you are witnesses against yourself that you have chosen the Lord for yourself to serve him. And they said, yes, we are our own witnesses. Now therefore, he said, put away your foreign gods which are among you, and incline your heart to the Lord, the God of Israel. And the people said to Joshua, the Lord our God we will serve, and his voice we will obey. So Joshua made a covenant with the people that day, and made for them a statute and an ordinance in Shechem. And then he wrote these words in the book of the law of God. And he took a large stone and he set it up there under the oak that was by the sanctuary of the Lord. And Joshua said to the people, behold, this stone shall be a witness to us, for it has heard all the words which the Lord has spoken to us. It shall therefore be a witness to you, lest you deny your God. And the people departed, each to his own inheritance. So it's important that we set up these memorial stones of the things that we determine in our hearts to be towards God and for him to be towards us, so that people can see and they can hear. And then it says, Israel served the Lord all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders who outlived Joshua, who had known all the works of the Lord that he had done for Israel. And then we go to Judges. That's not for today. I'm being wicked. So Joshua went through processes. Many of the processes were really spiritual. Some of them were terribly normal. Some of them were terribly strange. Some of them were caused by the people he associated with. The reality is that we have that in this house. There's stuff that they're interesting people here, that when you get to know them a little bit, you can ask them for some of their stuff, and they'll probably give it to you. But it's not for free, and you've got to work it out for yourself. And the wisdom came after a long time. It says at the end in Deuteronomy, because Moses put his hands on him, he was full of wisdom. But he led a nation. And not all of us are going to lead a nation, let's be honest. In fact, none of us might. I don't know. Who knows? But you do lead something. And the place is to go to God and say, okay, let me do that as effectively as possible. And allow him to give you wisdom. Allow him to lead you. Allow him to teach you the process. Is not to, that the process is the qualification. It's not the disqualification. He's your shepherd. He's totally capable of leading you. Totally, totally capable. Some of the places he leads us, you're going, I wouldn't have chosen this for me. Thank you very much. It's horrible. He's going, don't worry, my boy. It's okay. You're going to survive. And you'll learn something here. Often, it's a Graham Cook. He's a British prophet, but he says something very interesting. He says, when you find yourself in these spaces that you know nothing about, the question is not, what am I doing here? It's to say to God, who will I discover you to be that I couldn't know until I got here? Who are you in this space? And he'll show you. But it's the realization of going, if I wasn't in this space, the aspects and realities around you, I could never have known. The experience opens the access. Okay, and I'm going to stop being long-winded, pray, and ask you to go home.
Thank you for taking the time to listen, and we hope you've been blessed. For more information, visit rechurchza.com.